personal Euro Monzo, typical London boy. I ate Pret every day. Morrison's, there's a big Morrison's in Stoke Newington. I shopped at Amazon. I got my entertainment from Google Play. Lots of cool stuff on there. And you can see I spent money in UK, UK, Iceland, and Italy, which were my 2 holidays that year. And then you can see sort of a breakdown of my spending. So quite a fun thing. But let's take a step back. Why bother doing this kind of thing? First reason was that we thought it could be popular. So sort of like use of data in marketing is becoming more common. We took a big inspiration from brands like Spotify with their Year in Music campaign. Uber do it, like how many times you took Uber. I got a Eurostar one that was like how many times you took the Eurostar in a year. I was like, 1, okay, cool. But like we knew there was like an appetite for it. It's just a fun thing. You can see from the sort of insights we're pulling that like there's something like kind of fun or something kind of like intriguing about getting these insights about yourself. Everyone loves to hear about themselves. Secondly, we had the opportunity. We have the data, essentially, in order to provide the Monzo service, in order to show you where your money's going. Obviously, we have all your spending. We have like all this data. And we do use it already. We were already using this data to give you insights. In the app, at the end of every month, you would receive this monthly spending report, which was the total of how much you spent, and then a breakdown of that by category. You can see this in the app. So you can almost think of that as a prototype for Euro Monzo. This is something we were already doing, but we weren't necessarily dressing it up and marketing it like we did eventually with Euro Monzo. And lastly, we finally had the people. So I started Monzo at the start of last year when marketing was about 5 people. By the end of the year, obviously grown massively, maybe doubled in size, and suddenly we had a cross-functional team of like engineers, designers, writers, all the people you need to pull off this kind of project. So because we were finally cross-functional, we were able to do the ambitious things we'd always dreamt of doing. And this was the first really putting that cross-functional team to work on a project. So what were the goals? What were we actually trying to achieve with this thing? I guess the first thing we were trying to do was build something that really engaged our existing customers. It had to be good. It had to actually work. It had to provide value. People had to enjoy it. There's no point building something and it's just a flop and no one likes it. We really wanted to be something that made people like deepened their relationship with Monzo, made them feel like, oh, I love Monzo for doing this. I like Monzo gets me. Like it's a kind of psychological thing, but it makes you. We would hope we could build something that people actually love and enjoy, a really fun experience. And then not only is the experience personal to that individual, but then share that experience with the people around them. So we deliberately made it super easy to share on social, encourage people to download their Euro Monzo, put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook, all that kind of stuff. With the idea being that it would, have all the marketing goals, driving brand awareness, encouraging sign-ups, that kind of thing. Just putting it out there as Monzo is a brand that does this fun thing for me every year. I wish I'm going to sign up for Monzo so I can get my Euro Monzo next year. Not sure anyone actually said that, but I wish. Someone said that. Someone out there said that. And then also, it's just a good thing to sort of get press attention for. It's like we want people to write about it, and like Monzo becoming associated with a brand that is a cool, modern thing. It's very exciting. But we realized very early on there was one big consideration we needed to think about when kicking off this like ambitious data project, and that was the creepiness of using data in marketing. This is a big concern. You may have seen this thing that Netflix got in trouble for 2 years ago. To the 53 people who watched A Christmas Prince, which is a film on Netflix, every day for the past 18 days, who hurt you? Kind of mean-spirited data marketing from Netflix. They got pretty rightfully dragged for it with headlines like "Big Brother nonsense with your data." This was like a bad thing for them, although it did get a lot of retweets. So can't argue with the numbers. It's we wanted to avoid this. This is a worst case scenario. Monzo is a bank. A bank is sort of only as good as the trust that it has with its customers. If we did anything that was like weird, exposing people, calling people out in a negative way, that's really bad. There's a gritter again. We want basically a secondary but very important objective was avoiding being creepy. And it kind of opened up this almost philosophical dilemma, which is, what is creepy? Because some brands seem to be able to pull this use of data in advertising and marketing off very easily, while others struggle and are sort of called out for it. And we don't know where the line is. So the Netflix tweet, everyone hated it. Well, 100,000 people liked it. Everyone else hated it. But Spotify routinely use personal data insights, or they're using people's data in advertising. What's the difference? We could dig into why that is. Is it weird? Is it the tone of the Netflix tweet because it's sort of mean spirited, or is it the fact that the Ed Sheeran one is kind of more, anonymous? We don't know. Maybe they got permission from this person, or maybe they just made this person up. So, show of hands, who finds this Ed Sheeran billboard creepy? A few people. Okay, cool. Who finds the Netflix one creepy? So there is there's a scale here, a gradient. Who finds this creepy though? The use of data in the app for some people. Okay, cool. The way that's meant to go is it's yep, no. But so it's not creepy. It's not creepy to use people's data in a way that actually helps them and gives them value. We need that. That's basically how Monzo works. We present your data back to you. We're using your data whenever we give you this monthly spending report. Whenever you open your app and you see how much you're spending, whenever you receive a notification that says you just spent £5 at this location on this time and date, that's using your data back to you, but it's not creepy, it's helpful. So there are ways of using your data, Monzo as a service is a data service. So we felt confident that we could do it in a not creepy way as long as we were providing value and the tone was right. That seems to be the learning from these things is, if the tone's right and it's actually helpful and people like it, then it's good. If you're calling people out and being mean for no reason, it's bad. So what we did is to kind of help us navigate this moral maze, we set out some principles to help guide how we would think about it when we sort of were at the initial brainstorming stage. The easiest thing for us to do, of course, would be to simply give you totals for how much you'd spent over the year. We could just say, this year you spent, £50,000. You spent £30,000 on shopping. You spent £10,000 on whatever. You spent £2,000 at Pret a Manger or something. Probably me. But that's not very interesting. I'm not going to share that. It's money is still, spending especially is still a very personal subject. People don't like to necessarily flaunt how much they're spending on things. What is interesting, what is more fun, is the behaviors. It's much more interesting that I go to Pret a Manger every day for lunch than I spent £3,000 at Pret a Manger every year. It's calling out a behavior that I can recognize in myself that I wouldn't necessarily want to admit to. You see what I'm saying? It's the behavior is the insight, not necessarily the amount, even though they're two sides of the same thing. I spent £2,000 at Pret a Manger because I went there every day. But if you tell someone, you go to Pret a Manger a lot, they're like, yeah, I do. So yeah, that was the first thing. We wanted to basically avoid any kind of numerical totals in the experience. We didn't want it to be just your end of year statement. It was meant to be something more fun, more interesting, and more shareable, importantly, than that. We didn't want to be judgmental. It'd be very easy to shame people for their spending habits, and that's not what we want to do at all. We want to be very inclusive. We want to be very sort of progressive. We're thinking about people of all situations and circumstances. So it's really important to us to make sure the experience was very inclusive and not at all judgmental. So that meant very small considerations that you wouldn't even think of necessarily. Things like how we even write bits of copy in the experience were very important. Yes, we show you where you spent Monzo, how many times you went abroad with Monzo, but obviously not everyone chooses to travel or is in a situation where they're able to travel every year. Is it right for us to be, if it was you didn't seem to travel abroad with Monzo this year, sad face, that would be non-inclusive to people who are unable or choose not to travel. So it was important to us that the experience was focusing on behaviors and then also not making fun of those behaviors or being judgmental about them in any way. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that you were still in control of this whole thing. So we weren't going to be putting insights on billboards and tweeting things out against people's will. You received your year in Monzo in the app. It was up to you whether you even wanted to view it. And then when you viewed it, it was then up to you whether you wanted to share or not. You were still in control. It's your choice, is what we were saying. We didn't want to like necessarily confront people with things they didn't want to see, and then we weren't going to take those things and put them places they didn't expect to see them. So those three things together are the principles that kind of informed the very early stages of how we thought about how to build it and what to put in it. And now I'm going to hand over to Annabelle, who's going to talk about the sort of data side of things and how we started to put this thing together. Thanks.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Annabelle. I'm a data scientist at Monzo, embedded in our marketing team and supported year in Monzo. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to discuss how data supported the development of year in Monzo and also the final product that we ended up with. So as Richard has already mentioned, there was a lot that went on behind the scenes to build year in Monzo. And we were at a place where we had a cross-disciplinary team, so involving content, community, design, marketing, tech, and data supporting. So from my perspective, in data, the aim or the final aim was to create a robust data set of the 800,000 users that we generated year in Monzo for. And that data set was going to power all the tools that our marketing tech team built on top to support year in Monzo. So the individual image generation of everyone's shareable card, and also the authenticated web view, which was accessible through the app. So this referenced about 40 different columns for each user, representing data that we had chosen to show as part of year in Monzo. So to go over a few of the steps that we all worked together on as a team. So first was to brainstorm the data that we wanted to show. So we had our guidelines as to making sure it was non-creepy data. We also wanted to make sure that what we were showing was insightful and delightful for people to see. The second was to prototype that. So we use a tool internally called Looker, which is our business intelligence tool. We have a lot of data models under that, and it enables us to visualize data very quickly and easily. So I was able to prototype what that data set could look like for a particular user really quickly so that we could iterate on and learn as quickly as possible. So there were questions this helped us answer, like what is the minimum number of transactions that someone has to have made for their year in Monzo to be interesting to look at? What do we do about handling joint accounts? There were ideas around showing, for example, city-level merchant data, but we're relying on a lot of data coming from MasterCard, and that data was quite messy, so we decided it wasn't good enough data to present back to users. And other things like the personal category wasn't that interesting. Everyone shops at Boots, and same for holidays. We're all just using like the airlines that you would think everyone uses if you're traveling. So yeah, so this was a really great way for us to iterate quickly and then finalize the fields that we wanted to show in our final year in Monzo. Other things we also, other steps we had to go through. So I worked with our marketing tech team to understand the engineering requirements for the format that the data needed to be for them to then upload into a production database. And once that was done, generating the query from our analytics database. So we use BigQuery. And here I had to do a lot of QA as well to make sure that how I was defining different bits of information we were presenting is the same as how it's presented in the app, for example. And finally, lots of testing to make sure that users would see what they're expecting to see. And this is an example of what that prototype looked like in Looker. And it allowed us to very early on kind of see, is this even interesting information to look at in the first place? So a couple of comments from people in our marketing team that actually it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun to see where you had transacted the most in different categories. And then just a summary from the data side. So being embedded within a cross-functional team was incredibly powerful. We wouldn't have been able to build Year in Monzo, and especially at the speed at which we built it, without having the expertise and the skills that we have in the marketing team. Secondly, as a data scientist, we have ownership and the ability to change the data models, basically that we maintain within the business, to get the access to the data that we need. So as someone from data, this is also really powerful because I'm not relying on anyone else to have to pull the data for me, and I can transform it or create the views that I need myself. Looker, our business intelligence tool, allows us to really quickly iterate and learn, so we can reuse a lot of components, a lot of data points that may already exist. And just mentioning one of the data team values, which is to be mini CEOs on the projects that you work on. So I joined Monzo beginning of last November. So I was working on Year in Monzo in my first and second month, which was amazing. But to be responsible for such a big project, but also empowered and supported by the wider team to create work to the best of our ability. And yeah, generally being in the data team. So whether it's working on a project like this, where we're using data to power a product, or supporting the campaigns that the team are running in marketing, helping them run A/B tests, there are tons of exciting projects that we're working on where data can have a really big impact. So yeah, that's all from me. And I'm handing over to Pete to talk more about the engineering side.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi. So I'm Pete, again on the marketing team. I'm a web engineer. I'll go through a few of the products behind this, the engineering team behind it as well, and I just describe a few of the products behind the scenes. It comes in multiple parts. I'm not going to dive into technical details too much. If you have questions, grab me after, and I can go really into details as much as you want. So yeah, it was me, front-end engineer. We had a back-end engineer and a full-stack engineer. So this was truly a cross-functional team with lots of people ready to support. So let's get straight into it. There were 5 parts to this: the API, the image generation part, a web view, a website, and a feed item. So behind the scenes, you had the API and image generation. The user will never kind of see this. So after all the data crunching, after we've sculpted it in the right way, the front-end engineer like me will take that data set and put it into a design. So by that time, it's really shaped, it's really nice to use. And the image generation, we had to produce 2 images, the main square one that you see when you open the website. And there's this special OG image that you see on social networks. So it's this rectangular long one you see on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. So we created 2 there. But this is behind the scenes. You don't see this as a user. And then the web view, website, and feed item. These are user experiences, and I'll dive into them now. So image generation, like I said on the first one, the main one we wanted to show is the square image. This is optimized really for like web, and you'll see this also in the experience in the app. This is the OG image, which is shared on social networks, and it was important to optimize for those different networks. Facebook's really picky about getting it right, so once you get it right, it looks really nice on the feed. And in a social element, this is really important. And then the web view. So here's an example of that beautiful data that I'm sent, but then we take a design and turn it into something beautiful. So this is what we call a web view. It happens in the app when you click on an item, click on like a transaction item. And it's actually a website. So it looks like a web experience, but it's easy for a web engineer like me just to build. It's just a website behind the scenes. So kind of sneaky there. The good thing about this being in the app, though, is that we authenticate and identify that as you. So you log in, fingerprint test, enter in your passcode or whatnot, and then we'll know that it's you. Then we have a good request to get some data to know it's you, and then we place it in. So it's much more safer than, say, a web experience for us. And then at the very bottom, it was important to encourage people to share. So clicking on these things let you download the app, download the picture, or have it pre-opened into a Facebook sharing widget or Twitter widget. So we did that all completely for the user to make it really easy and simple, a good experience, really. So this is one example of sharing on a website is like, right ratios, and then the website on the right. So if you saw this on your friend's feed, you click on the link, and this is an example website you get on the right-hand side. It's not Spotify levels, to be honest. It was really difficult to build something really quickly in the amount of time, but this actually served most of our needs. So you can go into the app yourself if you've seen the experience. You can download Monzo if you don't have it, and you can see your friends' stats. Last but not least is the feed item. So we had to notify users to let them know, here's your experience, it's ready for you. So this is a little tool we use internally. It's just like sending an email, and we could like filter by people and get people ready, and they'll get a little push notification, and it will link into the app. So this is like saying hi. So yeah, that's 5 parts of the experience, and it sounds simple, but in theory, but in practicality, there were quite a few, let's say, hiccups. And in the value of transparency, we need to describe, a few of the things that kind of could have been better. I would put them all on here, but you don't have time to read it all. So I'll go through a few things now. Sharing on Facebook is kind of difficult. Working with their library, they were going through that whole Cambridge Analytica stuff, and they suddenly closed down all their scopes and stuff like that. So it was hard to work with that library. Wanted to add a map, but it was really difficult to make it working on a small screen. So this is like design feedback on the go as we're iterating. You get it all ready. It's ready in every single way. Everything's approved. You try to deploy it, and then your service provider has one of their off days, and then it doesn't work. So that was another hiccup. So some of these things just come in at you that you never expect. And then we're about to launch it. We haven't told anyone yet. And then somehow someone finds the URL, yearinmonzo.com, and starts talking about it on the internal Slack that they have. And they're like, what is this thing? And then start commenting. And it's like, yeah, people somehow discover these parts. No project manager. So in projects that are cross-functional, it's always good to have someone to link everyone together, get a plan together. And if we had that member, which we do have now, it makes things run so much more smoothly. And there were slight little bugs as well. So to get over this, obviously testing. So the main key thing to learn from this experience is test. Test early, test frequently, and in a well-organized fashion. And this is a don't, and a bad example for me. So yeah, don't ask people to reply to a thread and put all of their feedback into one thread and one conversation in Slack. Yeah, do have a plan. How are you going to test it? How are you going to prioritize it? And do be emotionally prepared. You don't, like when you work on something for a few weeks, everyone has a comment. So you need to know how to take building the experience. And I'm representing like multiple people in the engineering team. So any questions, please ask me after. And handing over to B now, he's going to talk about the end result.
Cool. So I'm B. I'm our content manager here at Monzo, and I'm going to talk a bit about the end result and also what's next. So basically, we launched Year in Monzo at the start of 2019, which was a little later than we'd initially planned, but overall, in the end, we were pretty happy with the result. Almost 300,000 people actually saw their Year in Monzo. 7,000 people downloaded it, and people used the hashtag 700 times. Some of you loved it. This one in particular because it read like a bad Year 8 French assessment. Some of you maybe not so much. A few journalists wrote about it. We had a couple of articles, one in the Times and one in the HuffPost, who were also feeling a bit conflicted maybe. And we even got top trending on Twitter in the UK, although we had some stiff competition from the Heathrow drone, if anyone remembers that. Overall, I think we felt like we achieved our goal to build something that you found insightful, interesting, shareable. It was super cool to see everybody kind of sharing their Year in Monzo on the day. We just turned on TweetDeck and watched it like Twitter and probably lost a whole day of work. And also, like in a more serious way, it was pretty cool to see people talking about money in this kind of like more lighthearted way, which I think is something that we don't see happening that often. So what did we learn? You seem to like You're in Monzo last year enough that we're considering doing it and other stuff like it again. And we definitely learned a lot from last year, both in terms of how we can make it better internally, the way that we run it, and also the end experience for you. Internally, we want to do that in a few ways. First of all, something that the rest of the team have alluded to a few times, but more time. We definitely did this in a pretty mad rush last year, so definitely don't want to be doing that again. Better planning, just getting more organized, and also having some clearer principles to guide what it is we want to do. So on the first one, you can see from last year, we kicked off this project with a half-hour meeting at the end of November and had initially planned to launch it before Christmas, which in hindsight was pretty unrealistic, made it really stressful, and also importantly, didn't give us the time to really refine the experience, take our time with testing, etc. So yeah, the learning is let's definitely not do that again. Secondly, better planning. Last year, we weren't super organized, to be honest. It was the first ever cross-functional project we'd ever run in the marketing team, and I don't think we really understood the full scope of it until we really got started. We even project managed the entire project in one Dropbox paper document, which you can see here, which was a complete nightmare. So now I think we understand how many moving parts there are with a project like this, and can understand how we need a clearer process to kind of manage them all, coordinate between all these people, all these different teams, all these different requirements, all these different timelines. And then finally, we also want to clarify the principles that we're following as we build this whole experience. Last year, we kept it pretty simple with the data that we included, and then followed the kind of rough rules that Rich discussed earlier to try to mitigate this like risk of being creepy. If we do this again, we want to put together a proper set of principles to like really guide and shape our work. We'd also want to work more closely with the vulnerable customers team that we have here at Monzo. I think we're pretty aware and acknowledge that data that can seem pretty innocuous to us and to lots of other people can easily be insensitive or awkward for others, whether you're struggling with debt, mental health, something else. Externally, we want to improve in a few ways. In the future, I think overall we can basically be a bit more ambitious with the actual end experience. So more insights, how can we explore some of our cooler, more out there ideas for the data? More interaction, how do we make that final experience a bit more dynamic and interactive? And then better sharing, how do we make that process of sharing your You're in Monzo or any other experience like this a little bit smoother? So first of all, more insights. Last year, kind of like I said before, we were pretty conservative with our ideas and we played it pretty safe. We showed you stuff like your top 5 merchants, the number of friends you have on Monzo. In part, we didn't have time to build something super elaborate and out there. But then also, we wanted to test the waters. Again, your bank doing this is very different to your music streaming service doing this. We were hyper conscious of that, and we essentially wanted to get a better gauge of what you found interesting, what you found useful, what you felt comfortable with. But in the future, I think we can afford to be a bit more creative and ambitious with the data that we include, and we've already started doing some brainstorming. We've got some fun ideas around comparing your behavior to other Monzo users, adding kind of like quiz, guessing, interactive elements. And also, finally, crucially, we want to give you an overview of all of your money and not just your spending. So what were you saving up for? Did you meet any of your savings goals? Do you have a shared tab from your like group holiday with your friends, whatever? And then secondly, more interaction. So last year we worked with Nat, a visual designer, on the final experience, but it was relatively static. You kind of just scroll down. Next time, how can we build something that's a bit more dynamic and interactive? And then better sharing. Last year, while you could share this across all the social platforms, the process was maybe a little bit fiddly and not super flexible. And while ultimately, I think it is the content that we include that will make you want to share something, we want to make that final process as smooth as it can be. So yeah, that's what we learned. Let me just hand over to Rich.
No. Cool. So yeah, as we said at the start, we do have suggestion jars either side of the room. Please do give us your ideas there, or come and give them to us in person. And now I'm going to invite the team to come back up, and we'll take any questions you have for us. Thank you. Yen, do you want to run with the mic? We have a question right here. I'll use this mic for now.
Thanks. So those principles you came up with at the start clearly required a little bit of thought. I mean, they sound fairly straightforward when you say them out loud, but like you had to work out how people were going to react to things, and what was important in terms of the considerations you had maybe on the data side. So given that you did it in a really short amount of time, did you do any sort of analysis of what users were going to think of it, and whether you were going to accidentally give any data away that you shouldn't be, that sort of thing? How did you make sure that it was kind of not going to cause any problems when you released it?
Sorry. So I think, like I said, as the first instance, we just tried to play it pretty safe, and most of the data that you see in this first year in Monzo was data that you'd be quite familiar with already seeing in the app. And then, yeah, those kind of rough initial principles, like we essentially, it's just like an intuition judgment thing. I think we just kind of felt, we're Monzo customers too. Like that's a dangerous way of thinking if that's the only thing you consider. But like, what would we consider to be creepy, invasive? Ultimately, yeah, we just try to stick with information that you already see in the app, but just kind of like analyzed and presented in like a new or more surprising way.
Yeah, there wasn't much like talking to users outside of Monzo. We were keeping it relatively close to our chests at that point. But now that we've done it before, it's really an opportunity to sort of gauge where the sort of line is. So please, if you have thoughts about it, let us know. Thanks.
So, did you think all these efforts that you did with managing the data and insights, do you think that this information can be used in the app for the future to look at what you're spending, or who's the top, I don't know, where you shop the most, like every month, or like to have constant access to this so you don't have to wait until the end of the year? Yes, the sharing part is the important, like you can show people, but as a personal information towards you, do you think that all this effort that you did can be used in the app to check up now and then how you spend your money?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. And from the reaction that we saw, there was feedback from users saying, yeah, can we see similar things in the app in summary? So we made sure to give feedback to our internal teams on the success of Year in Monzo. And essentially, the teams that are looking after summary and the summary tab, where it would probably fit in the best, are kind of aware of the success of Monzo, but that will kind of feature into the product roadmap and priorities on how summary evolves in the company.
Also for us, it was quite a cool moment to see the product teams actually being inspired by something that we had instigated from marketing, when usually we just market their products. So yeah, that was quite nice.
Yeah.
I think also like it kind of opened up the door. Yeah. Okay, I'll just stop talking. No, I think it opened up the door to more interesting uses of data. That was okay. It opened the door to more interesting uses of data for us as a marketing team. You may have seen we did a series of posts called Trending Spending, which wasn't like on a personal level, so it wasn't taking like your insights and giving you better access to them, but it was a series of posts where we analyzed kind of what was up and coming restaurants, cafes, that kind of thing in different. We started just with areas of London. And I think things like that, we kind of like realized these are projects we can actually do with the data we have. I'll take it.
Just another question about the testing part of it. So more in general, actually. So previously, when the company was smaller, how would you have approached sort of user testing? So obviously, here you had lots of sort of employees give their opinions about it, but back in earlier days, what was the approach there if you didn't want to go public with testing? I mean, you only had a small sort of company to test it with. What was the approach there? Or if any of you are sort of old enough here, long enough to comment on that.
I mean, this is kind of half a guess, but I guess within product, they would actually just be conducting like small scale user testing with like interviewees that they would find. Yeah, I think from a marketing point of view, answer is probably we just never had that problem because we never tried to build something as ambitious as this. But also like on the flip side of that, definitely like only doing internal testing with like a bunch of our colleagues is not a very sensible way to do it. Kind of the stuff we were talking about making sure that the experience wasn't insensitive or exclusive or whatever. Doing testing the way we did it in this time around definitely won't flag up those issues, or probably won't. So I think that's definitely something we want to consider if we do this again. How do we do more rigorous user testing that isn't just getting a bunch of our colleagues to type something into Looker?
Hey, so continuing on that point, really. So this was a one-off project to us. We wanted to see if we can deliver one really great project, one experience to users as a cross-functional marketing team. So that in itself was a test of seeing if we can deliver that sort of delightful value to people. So as you hear, other teams were inspired, people are thinking about spending reports, we're writing blogs about it. So in that way, we're using it as a way of understanding if we can replicate this and build more of a cross-functional team to do these experiences. So when it comes to like in itself, it's not a product feature on the roadmap that we're going to deliver all the time. So because it was a slightly different project in its own right, it was a bit different, much more like driven and like iterated on compared to like normal features you see in the app. Yeah.
Yen, can we take a question from anyone on the back? There's a question here. Great.
Testing, hello. I'm interested in the setup of the teams. When you're in a cross-functional team like this, what percentage of your day is working on specifically this versus anything else that could be going on at the time?
That is actually a question that we're considering as we start to work out if we're going to do it this time around. Like, I think obviously last year we were super limited by time, but this year we've started thinking about it a lot earlier. But because of the nature of the project, you could just be as ambitious as you wanted to be, include everything you wanted to include. 12 of you could spend all of your days on it for the next 6 months. Is that a valuable thing for us to do as a company? Probably not. So yeah, in terms of last year, I'd say over the couple of weeks, probably, I don't know, we spent, it's hard to name a percentage, but we definitely because it was such a short period of time, we were all pretty focused on it. If we were to do it again, I think the idea would be very much that we plan in advance. We try to time box the people involved's time a lot more rigidly. But yeah, sorry, it's hard to say a specific amount. It depends. So for people who work in disciplines like Annabelle and Pete, this will be one of a few projects they're working on. Maybe you can talk about that in a sec. But yeah, for us, it's we'll be balancing this with our other day-to-day work.
Yeah, I guess from my side, so I support the marketing team and also one of our other product squads. But again, because this was the main project so soon after I joined, that it was, taking up, I guess, most of my time for those 2 or 3 weeks. And yeah, this time round, it's going to become part of our marketing and data Q4 goals, essentially. So making sure we carve out enough time for that, but still having other goals and enablers for the team that we're focusing on. But yeah, I think the plan is to do kind of some mini data hacks. So we've brainstormed some additional ideas, and hopefully we'll get some more from all of you later today. but to time box that, kind of come up with the prototypes and a solid plan for testing. So now we have like a few months basically to prepare for the next one.
Cool. Yen, there's one right here.
Yeah, hi, Peter. You mentioned that it took some time to get the software hitting the ground running. Can you talk a little bit about how you actually developed and tested the software? And I know Monzo utilized microservices in their development. Did you use containers to support and manage microservices as well?
Cool. Front-end developer can't answer all of those questions. But so when I talk about web views, that's a platform in itself. So rather than developing whole screens in the app, and then iterating and releasing it through the app store, that cycle's a bit slow and it has its own process. A web view kind of, it's in the name, it's just a little mini frame. It's a website. So this can be developed outside of mobile app development. So you don't need iOS or Android. So like a web engineer like me, I do all the kind of web testy things that you can do already and build an experience that lives inside the app. So this will be like user testing, or I'm writing my own test programmatically as well, sending it around people. I'm treating it like a website I'm deploying. Behind the scenes, that API, that would be a microservice. So essentially a mini unit of logic that we separate out just for this particular service. So it's very separated from like payments or operations, like non-critical thing. So we take this and then we deploy it in a container. So it's in itself isolated, reusable, like a Lego brick of some sorts. But that is an infrastructure we use heavily throughout the app, throughout our company in the back end. I can't talk too much on the back end, to be honest, but yeah, the front end was a web view sort of app. Cool, thanks. Good question.
I'm going to take one from the front down here.
Rather quick. Besides compliance, who else did you need, let's say, approval from, like any other head of department or, you know?
No, we're definitely in control. We definitely talked. We talked to like all the teams that we thought would be interested in knowing about this. So yeah, and it's a good question. I'm gonna hand over to Annabelle, who knows more about this than I do.
But yeah, for sure, in terms of heads, so Tristan, our head of marketing, was in the first kickoff meeting, and then from a data side of view, I was our head of data, Dimitri, keeping him very up to date with the project and asking him lots of questions. So yeah, the heads of knew it was happening, and then it was kind of down to us as a team to then communicate that to the rest of the business that this project is on its way, and get buy-in from everyone else.
I guess part of your question is also about like who has to sign off on stuff. I guess the answer isn't that we had to ask anyone for permission, and I think the kind of unique instance of having done it last year is that it's something we talked about for probably a year or more before, but had literally nowhere near close to the people with the right skills to actually help us do it. Now that we kind of like were basically just really hyped up about it, made like a strong argument for kind of trying it out. At the time, like I said, I think we were being a bit unrealistic about the actual amount of time and effort it would take to do. So we were like, we think this could be like an impactful project for us to do for like a few weeks before Christmas, testing out, like Pete was saying, what a cross-functional project in marketing would look like. I think now it's more about us trying to make a compelling argument for why this is impactful, why it's valuable to reach however many 100,000 people, have loads of people sharing it on Twitter. And I guess those are the kind of like existential questions that we ask about the marketing we do in general as well.
I think we've got time for two more. Take one from the front here.
Very basic question. What were the hiccups when it comes to sharing on social? Like, I like to hear about the problems. And would you do anything differently when you sharing to social? Will you play the data differently in those social channels so you can feed to that audience better?
Technical question, yeah. Sharing on social. So this is like the pros and cons of building a website housed within an app. So there were certain permissions that we wouldn't allow. It's a restricted browser, right? So it's not like browser, you can do whatever you want. It's you can only do these things, hide these parts, have a restricted controlled sandbox in a way. And jumping out the browser, triggering certain events, which was required by some of the Facebook library, was not allowed. So that was one hiccup with sharing. In general, it was making an experience that was very, very optimized for different sharing experiences. You saw that we generated 2 card sizes. If you want it to be optimal, there's one for Instagram. There are different dimensions at other websites as well. Spotify, as a great example, they had on-the-fly generated all the images for all the platforms, and will serve it to you at for the right channel. So we would have wanted to make that part of the flow better, for example. Their flow on the website was also very good. So as you saw, it was just try the experience out or download the app. Like we could have put a lot more into that page. That might be a hint, it might not be, but the web page is great for sharing, right? So that's something that we could have done a bit more of. But yeah, it's mostly those things. But hiccups aside, there was we thought we would put WhatsApp in there, for example, thinking no one wants to send this privately, and it happened to be one of our highest used sharing experiences. So yeah, there was some surprising benefits. So I think we want to continue that. We continue.
Yeah, like from the social sharing side, it was really interesting that WhatsApp was actually the highest. It was like 2/3, I think, of the sharing happened over WhatsApp, which is great. That's like the kind of most people sharing it directly with their friends and friendship groups is what we wanted. The obviously frustrating part of that is we have no visibility over it. We couldn't see it. Sort of invisible social, dark social stuff. And also we were looking at when we're looking at people sharing it on social media, you're sort of up against the screenshot function. Like you have to build an experience that is more delightful than just screenshotting something, which screenshotting something is the easiest thing in the world. Like we gave people every button to press, and they would just screenshot the bits they wanted to do. So from a cynical social marketing side of things, that's not so much a hiccup, but an interesting frustration to have. Not a bad problem to have by any means. People are sharing it, but in terms of counting towards our KPIs. Leanne, one last question right at the back.
So personal data analytics, I think, are a really powerful tool. Obviously, Monzo get lots of information, and the year in Monzo was released. It was great. It gave some information. Where do you think the balance is in providing enough information that users are engaged, but not overwhelming people with lots and lots of information as you drill down into different levels? I guess I'm looking towards the 2019 year in Monzo.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and definitely something we'd love to hear your feedback on. Like, how much is too much? I think we struck a really good balance, an experience that you could fully take in about 2.5 minutes. That feels about right. That's quite a lot of time to be spending reading something your bankers, a website your bankers built. So yeah, you're right. We don't want to be presenting people with a massive spreadsheet. We don't want to be overwhelming them with hundreds and hundreds of facts. And if we do it again this year and we're amazing at generating every idea we can think of, maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe it's too much information. Maybe it is overwhelming, as you say. One interesting idea you could do is not show everyone every single possible thing we can show them. So B, I know your name, sorry, stuttering. B talked about different things we could show people that aren't spending, for instance, saving, roundups, maybe how many days you got paid early, if you got paid early with Monzo, how many times you have met your savings pots goals. And obviously not everyone's going to have done that. Not everyone is going to have got paid early or that had roundups turned on. So maybe we can do things like hiding things that aren't relevant to people. So still having an optimal number of things we show you, an optimal amount of time that we expect you to sort of spend in the experience, but kind of toggling in and out of different things. I know that's a somewhat more advanced thing than what we built last year, but something that we could explore this year.
On the point of toggling, we actually did a bit of that on the web experience. So we'll deliver all the sections to everybody, but if you didn't have enough transactions, if you had 0, you don't want to see you have 0 friends, right? So there was some element of like, or do you? There's some element of like conditional like data. Some people see this, some people don't see anything. So that was for the edge case of like, you don't have any data, you won't show it. But I think it comes down to choice, right? So how do you draw a line for 3 million people with something so sensitive, and we can't come down with a hard and flush line? So yeah, I think we consider choice as part of that. This was a choice-driven experience as well. So yeah, I think it's all in your hands. It's empowerment in the user. So that's the way of doing it.
I also think it's a bit of a design question as well. Like, how do you create their experience? I mean, sure, last year, if you included loads of information, you'd literally just be there scrolling down for an hour, a relatively static experience. But I think we've got a product designer who's joined the team. I think it's more of a question of how do you make this experience so it's still interesting and surprising. And I don't know, like, there's a bit more kind of like pace and a bit more of a story to it than you literally just scrolling down an endless web view of information.
Cool. That's all got time for questions, but obviously we'll still be milling around. Please do stick around yourselves as well. Help yourselves to another drink. And thank you so much for coming. And fill in the suggestion jars. Thank you. Cheers.